Welcome to Penny Tolerable, everyone. I am Jeremy Ellis, and this is my friend Jesse.
Hello, everyone.
Today we are blabbing about B movies, and our movie is The Phantom.
The 1996 one, to be
Hmm.
clear.
Yeah, not the semi-futuristic Isabella Rossellini one.
So, for those who don't know, let's shall we give a little bit of background on the Phantom?
Hmm. Would you like me to do that?
Sure, because I'm just going to read off Wikipedia.
Oh, well, I mean, you go ahead.
The Phantom is a comic book strip written in 1937. Um, um, But in all seriousness, it seems to just be a continuous publication. The Phantom was pretty much considered one of the first leotard sporting superheroes. Um, just predating Superman by a few years, I think, or a year, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so he was coming from the line of pulp heroes like The Shadow, Mandrake, I think. Our defenders of the earth.
Doc
Um,
Savage,
mhm.
Spider.
So, and the character had already been established as someone with a long lineage of uh like he was basically probably the first legacy superhero.
Yeah.
Um, you know, so it's interesting to see how many tropes of superheroes can be traced back to the Phantom. Um, but for me, I've frankly just never been a fan in the fact that I've just never gone into the Phantom. Um, I love my DC comics. I enjoy Marvel, but I've never really read much of the Phantom. So, watching this movie and a little bit of the sci-fi series were probably my only real gateways to the character. And as it is, I don't feel this is a bad introduction. But I do feel this probably came out at the wrong time, like a lot of superhero movies, pre Marvel, really, pre MCU, I should say.
Yeah, the kind of timing and as you were saying, it's a very good introduction to the Phantom. As a person who knows the Phantom, it's yeah, this is a pretty damn good Phantom movie, all things considered. But and one thing I wanted to talk about that you mentioned was a legacy superhero, which is something I always liked. It always lent well to serialization, which you're a fan of Doctor Who, so I'm sure you appreciate the fact that once one character kind of wears out their welcome, you can bring in another character, which I think is really interesting. You have characters like that, like the Crow, the Mask, Grendel. It's a little collection. But
Hmm.
yeah, the timing of this was I wouldn't say it was bad, but there was just a lot of stuff around here where superhero movies and kind of genre movies in general were kind of floundering.
Hmm.
We had big successes a few years back. This all started, I wouldn't go back to Doc Savage in 75 because that's kind of a fluke. It would be like bringing up Annie in 1980. But I really think it started with The Shadow, and it's kicked off a ball that is kind of still rolling. Like people still want to see pulp heroes on the big screen, and it never, even if it's a good movie, it never really makes quite a lot of money. Or I know, I think the Green Hornet made some money, but
Mhm.
a lot of people didn't seem to like it. I like Shadow. A lot of people didn't seem to like it.
Shadow's a good one, I think.
Um, John Carter,
Oh, that one didn't do well at all.
no. Uh, I liked it, but yeah, I was like, it's because it's a weird audience you're making it for.
Like, I think the
Like young people who
the
are into old shit. That's what I don't think that's a sustainable uh kind of mm.
it can probably be if done well. Like I think the most enduring kind of pulp movie remake from like beyond the 30s would probably be the famous Flash Gordon film with the Queen soundtrack blaring, Brian Blessed unhinging his jaw
Yeah.
uh,
I
as the
think of
Hawkman.
I think of Flash Gordon, which is a good example, and I think of another movie which is not strictly a pulp hero movie, but is essentially a pulp hero movie, and that would be Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension,
Hmm.
which I think was originally going to be a Doc Savage movie, but they just kind of reworked it. And I mean, people are crazy for that movie. Didn't, I mean, it didn't do well when it came out because we never got, Buckaroo Banzai versus the World Crime Syndicate. But yeah, people really love that movie.
And then when I'm thinking of pulp heroes, I'm also thinking, and I haven't seen it, so that kind of shows the diminishing audience. Blue Beetle, who's another legacy character and has his roots in pulp heroes with the original Charlton comics. So it's interesting to see that, it feels like there is a demand, but it's a like you said, it's kind of a niche audience. Because the pulp heroes have a very different flavor from, let's say, your Batman or your Spider-Man or things like that, where they're usually given the chance to be a little more anti-heroic.
They're more anti-heroic and they're less comic book adventures and more ripping yarns. Do you know what I mean? Like there are a lot of these adventures that take the characters to then quite exotic worlds, quite exotic lands. And
Hmm.
it's a very kind of two-fisted type of adventure. And again,
Hmm.
two-fisted, a lot of the characters, it was either guns or fisticuffs. And when they did have an ability, it was something minor, like the green llama could turn into a gas, and Shadow can cloud men's minds, or Mandrake can create illusions. It was always something fairly minor, something that was not
Hmm.
like a point and shoot power. And but yeah, there's always that element.
Like they seem to be kind of situated between noir. There's a certain kind of realism to them, and like almost psychological terror that they bring to their rogues gallery, um wh- where it's just kind of tied up in stories of revenge or stories of retrieve. Again, it feels very much of an era that very few sort of cinematic outlets have captured. Like, let's say Flash Gordon would be a good one. Indiana Jones and like Star Wars are George Lucas's love letters to these types of stories. So it's interesting that while again they have their fan base, I it's hard for them to find something a little more stable as their foundation, at least financially.
Yeah, and what was I gonna say? Yeah, the which is not to say that pulpiness cannot be made into a movie. I mean, when you think of a pulpy movie, something comes to mind like Reefer Madness, Freaks. Uh, you think of like later Grindhouse movies, which were in their
Hmm.
own way very pulpy for the 70s pulp. So I think, even though their kind of 1930s pulpiness seems tame, um, there is like a disturbingness to it, kind of a like you said, a psychological element. And uh, I think making it great, like, for lack of a better example, I think maybe the grim and gritty stuff of the 90s is pretty pulpy, which is why a lot of those characters were kind of revamped.
And in some ways, I think like going back to the movie itself, it came out at a decent time for superhero movies in terms of where everything was going. It just never really seemed to find its audience
Hmm.
because I feel like Batman '89 kind of does have that pulpy element where it feels like this is Tim Burton reading the 1939 first appearance Batman you know with his love of guns, his love of hanging monster men, um, with a gleeful smile. This seemed like that kind of era, and I can see where something like the Shadow can probably fit in. Something like the Phantom can fit in because that there was an inherent pulpiness to that movie, and that was the definitive superhero movie until maybe Blade or X-Men came along.
Hmm.
Until Marvel really started to see that resurgence. So it's it feels like only big names really got to succeed back in this era where you wouldn't have someone like let's say Captain Marvel or Black Panther actually
Hmm.
get a movie where they shone brightly both financially and critically, but you would get you know it's not to say that there weren't good movies being made. Like again, we go back to our Phantom and Shadow. They those seem to be the movies of the day right now. Um, I think both are good productions. Both really seem like spiritual successors to, hey, we're writing this this resurgence of pulp without seeming like oh they're just copying Jack Nicholson or Michael Keaton,
Hmm.
and I really like that. But it's just a shame that it never found its audience. Even Batman, the big name of the day, was kind of in his twilight as Batman Forever had come out just shortly before the Phantom, and Batman and Robin was on the horizon, effectively killing the appeal of superhero movies for. Well, it didn't last too long, but it definitely left a sour taste for a while.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you.
And yeah, for me, just watching the Phantom, it really does feel like one of those again where you see exotic places, not some CGI grand uh other world, but just okay, here they are in the Caribbean or in Africa. Um
Yeah, the locations are beautiful in the movie.
mhm. Yeah, so the exotic locations and even the sets, um I kind of miss those old waterlogged sets where
Hmm.
you could tell that they had like a little, oh well, not so little pool there. So I really liked the Phantom's finale in
Yeah,
that sense,
Popeye Sims headquarters.
uh giving me major Hook vibes in terms of set design. So this movie doesn't suffer from scale by any stretch.
And
Um,
of course, we also have, sorry to interrupt you, we also have the dude that played Shang Tsung as Kabai Singh. Wonderful 90s uh Asian actor. You know, right up there with like Byron Man and guys like that. And Shui Wong fan. There were some good ones around that time. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
oh no, just I was complimenting a lot of the set design, the cityscapes. There's a lot going on to really admire in terms of the sets, in terms of the acting. Um, that really make me feel that this is a bit underrated. Again, this was a time where only big names would get the limelight, and even then, big names could fall and fall hard. Superman had fallen, Batman had fallen. Marvel had really just had like a series of direct to TV, direct to video, and sometimes not even published at all. Looking at you, Roger Corman's Fantastic Four. Um,
I still think it's the best Fantastic Four movie.
you're saying The Incredibles isn't?
You know what I mean.
Okay, now I just want to give everyone the image of Reed Richards marrying the Thing, and that's The Incredibles. The end. But
The Thing with a dump truck ass.
yeah. There's a reason you keep coming back to The Thing.
If and now if you're watching that in a movie theater, make sure you're not near a certain film critic, or you might have a rude awakening.
So, um, I've lost my train of thought.
Fuck it.
But um, this was where an age where everyone could, no one was infallible. This wasn't a an age where you can expect someone like Shang-Chi to get a movie and actually make millions of dollars. Um,
Honestly, I think Shang-Chi would have made good at this time. Like this was
mhm.
around like the Jackie Chan type era. I think he might have cleaned up.
He might have. Like I have I'm not doubting the capabilities of these superheroes actually being successful. I'm doubting the fact that, general audiences don't
Mhm.
really tend to go. I think Blade would be like the only outlier where this isn't a character who's too well known, but the film just really appealed to people.
Yeah. And it kind of redid the character. Like people who read the comics know the Gene Colan Blade, puffy leather jacket, big goggles, nice afro, bandolier of steaks. And then you get Wesley Snipes coming in, just coolest motherfucker in town. And that's just Blade now.
Hmm.
It's like how Nick Fury is just
Samuel Jackson now.
yeah, you and me. You remember when Nick Fury was white? That was an
David Hasselhoff.
David Hasselhoff, yeah.
I also remember, um, is he still? I haven't been keeping up with my comics. Is he still white in the main universe, or is he? Because the Samuel Jackson one comes from the alternate universe from 2000, where I think someone had watched too much Pulp Fiction.
What it is, I think this is what it is. The Sam Jackson Nick Fury is the illegitimate son of the David Hasselhoff Nick Fury. I think.
I guess we'll need someone to fact check us on that. But yeah, I wonder, did this Phantom movie have much effect on the character and how he was portrayed afterwards?
Um not not particularly a bit design wise. Like
Hmm.
one of the elements in the comics is yes, stripy underwear. This may seem
Oh, I remember.
inconsequential, but he has stripy underwear, and they tried it for like a few camera tests. It's like this isn't working, and since then they've kind of jettisoned that. So I guess in a kind of bladish, McFurious way, uh, his underpants are gone, and it's made of it's he. They've made the character sleeker,
Hmm.
a lot sleeker, I think, with the revitalization, like with the kind of intelligentsia knowing about him again. I think people took a lot of opportunities to kind of update him. You had uh, Phantom 2040, which was done by Peter Chung, which was pretty cool. You have the Isabella Rossellini movie where he's like a parkour guy or whatever. And you also had an updated version in the comics. So I think it kind of goosed the character a little for people. Like kind of, and since then he's been. I mean, it's not like it's 21st century, everything, but the comic strips still have the feel, but there's modern stuff. It's the way that like Blondie and Dagwood talk about TikTok like on occasion.
Hmm.
Like how that's like super fucking weird, but it's like, what are you gonna do? It's a comic strip.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's and a lot of comic strips have done that. Like this kind of like Dick Tracy's gonna still look like Dick Tracy, but his wrist thing is gonna be like a Google Watch or whatever. Like that's
Hmm. And I don't know. I feel kind of going by that. Do you feel like there's a strong like '90s influence on this movie, or do you feel it's kind of presented with an earnestness
a,
of like the '40s,
a
'30s
bit of
vibe?
both, I think, because it does have a 90s feel in the cinematography, especially like you said, the sets. This looks like maybe I'm just looking at it through the CGI tinted glasses that I have on now, but uh it feels very 90s. It has a distinctly 90s feel, whatever that might mean. But I do think it stays true to the 40s stuff. Like yeah, like you can imagine if you didn't have the bigger effects, this could be like, and I know they weren't making comic book characters in the movies back then, but this could be like pretty solid thriller with like Cary Grant or someone, you know what I mean? I'm not putting on bubble tights. That I realize my Cary Grant is a lot like my Matt Berry.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was expecting you to shout "Bat" at any time now, but like when I think of Batman '89, a lot of it just feels like, it's trying to capture like a timelessness in some ways, and then you have a Prince soundtrack over it all, which dates it for sure. But otherwise, the technology that's pretty minimal tech. It could be at home as a high tech piece of equipment in the '50s just as easily as it could be a dated relic in the '90s.
Mhm.
So I know I have always loved that about the Byrne movies, and I feel the Phantom kind of has a similar vibe when we see New York kind of looking
Oh yeah.
uh, its best in terms of like, oh, this is straight from, you know, um, a '50s comic basically, and also, it could be something that's contemporary as well. It's almost like a caricature of the city, and it's one that I really admire. I really like seeing just the sets have their own kind of vibe, and where this doesn't seem like, oh, this is not the New York where you'll see Kevin McAllister and Tim Curry getting up to all
Mhm.
sorts of antics, but just
I,
this is like the
I'm
great.
getting up to antics too. I'm in the hotel too. Just always remember that. I showed him where to go. I showed him he'd be even more lost in New York if it wasn't for me.
I was avoiding that one particular reference. But yes, you wouldn't see that person hanging around. Well, probably because he's not welcome there. Probably because he's going to be arrested. I mean, he's already booked.
Well, it's the 1940s. You might see some people that agreed with him.
Unfortunately, we still see people who agree, but that's neither here or there.
Yeah, we're
Uh,
getting a little Chapo trap house here. So,
but yeah, I like the New York that's portrayed here, and this movie kind of feels a bit like, in the best possible sense, a made-for-TV movie. In some ways, just with a high budget, um, where they get to explore all these locations, get to have these elaborate sets. Um, it seems like your basic kind of fetch quest against you and an enemy, you know,
mhm.
um, where you're both looking for some artifact of power. And I don't know, there's something I like about that trope, that just makes for a good TV movie and makes for an entertaining watch. I can tell, it's something that's not the highest. Doesn't really require too much thinking, but it is something fun because it's two people up against the clock, and it's something that I frankly enjoy as a trope. And even if this does follow along with that trope, I got a blast out of it, especially just seeing just how much they poured into the effect, or the backgrounds, the effects, settings, and then I just like the acting, whether it's more the earnestness of like Billy Zane to more hammy characters.
When you said the the effects and the feel of New York, I and made for TV, I honestly thought of Trial of the Incredible Hulk. Have you ever seen
Yeah, it
with
kind of has.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, I could
and
see that.
something I found interesting. I had known this for a while. Not like since I'd watched The Phantom, but for a while. Um, there was an earlier attempt to bring the Phantom uh to the screen as early as the 40s or 50s, I think. And it was going to be the Phantom, like like a Republic serial. And something happened. I don't know if it was Lee Falk, the creator, said like, nah, don't do this. I don't know what it was. They lost the rights, but they were already completely set up and had spent the money. So it's like, oh shit, we need to make a fucking cereal with the Phantom, but we can't make a Phantom cereal. So they just gave him jodhpurs and a flying helmet, and he's Captain Africa. And it was not good.
No, a lot of those, like, I don't know. I'm a sucker for the Batman and Robin serial,
With gay.
uh, with Gabe, our favorite henchman. I'd actually seen that unriffed first,
Hmm.
and all the time I was just thinking, I'm not hating it, but I I just really struggled with it. It was such a it was like a comic book plot, a single, in those old comics where you see 1/3 of the book dedicated to a story.
Hmm.
It felt like it was that 1/3 of a comic book story dragged out over 15 episodes.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Um, the serials could drag. That was their problem. Like if you want to watch an old serial, a lot of them, because of public domain laws and stuff like that, are available on YouTube. And what a lot of people do is just edit them all together, like all 12 to 15 chapters. Don't watch those because they're not that good. What you should do is if any studio ever repackaged them as a movie, like tight hour and a half, watch it. You'll get the serial,
Hmm.
basically. It's the best way to put it.
Yeah. And I get that. For me, that's a little sacrilege, just, given I love my 10-part Doctor Who War Games episodes. Leave me alone.
I mean, if
but
you like it, then
but no, it's still a format that can drag, and I do acknowledge that. Um, the Phantom doesn't really have that problem. It's very fast paced. I think, with good amount of action scenes throughout. It was really a fun movie to watch. I think if I had to choose, I would probably go with Alec Baldwin's The Shadow, but it was still good. I
it
don't really
was.
get. I don't really get why this would have been a flop at the time. Um, because I think it only made back half its budget, at least on the box office. This was also a time where you could find a second life on home media.
Yeah.
So maybe the film broke a little even thanks to that.
It personally, I think the best comic strip movie not in terms of like being a good movie, really, although I like it. The best comic strip movie, I'm gonna have to say Popeye.
And that's one I need to check out.
It's the comic strip on the screen.
Hmm.
That's that's the beginning and the end of it. It's so much of it is from the comic strip. Not a lot from the cartoon. I think Altman was like more liked Thimble Theater, but there's still a lot of good stuff.
Hmm. And then one thing I was thinking about just in terms of comic adaptations was the '60s Batman series.
Yeah,
A lot of the scripts were lifted straight from the Golden Age comics, or a lot of the stories anyway.
people people gave those a hard time like later on, especially like 80s when people were trying to take Batman seriously, and but there was still the residual Biff Pow Boom type of sentiment. People kind of gave those a hard time. And I like how they're getting a kind of a second life or
Hmm.
third life. But yeah, they were so much like the kind of Dick Sprang, Kurt Swan type comics. They're basically lifted completely, except uh, I don't think they had the budget for the giant Dick Sprang. Well, giant Dick Sprang. Wow, it's pretty
Go
tolerable.
on, we're listening.
Pretty tolerable after dark. Uh, the giant Dick Sprang props.
The ones that just sprang on us.
They just spring up.
They do.
They
And
spring.
that's what Dick tends to do.
Yeah, Dick Springs.
Take sprang.
Sprang.
Past tense.
He sprang, he still springs. Still springs. He takes Cialis.
I don't know. I'm just thinking of coily, no springs.
Oh yeah, that's why the guy really wanted Springs to come back. His wife wanted the Springs to come back. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The
But
fuck
yeah,
about
we were talking about like earnest comic book adaptations. Um, Again, I think a lot of comic book movies today are kind of losing that earnestness,
Yeah.
where they play things pretty straight to the source material, uh, in favor of oh, that's a weird thing that's in the comics.
What were you expecting? Yellow spandex? I didn't like that line at the time.
Mhm.
It was like, well, you're the one making the fucking X-Men movie. Why not put him? You got a guy with knives in his hands. Go for broke,
Mhm.
you weirdos. I I honestly never like not even from like a fan perspective of like, hey, want to see Wolverine in his Claremont costume. No, I don't mean that. I mean like, why not?
Mhm.
There's a guy named Wolverine running around with knives in his hands. He's fucking dress him however. He's
Mhm.
fighting a guy named Magneto. I love comics, but Magneto, that fucking name.
But no, I really don't like when they do that. And again, it's not so much the accuracy, and I just want to get one more comment on that particular one. Thank you, Blade and X-Men, for making every superhero a leather-clad person, apart from maybe Spider-Man and Batman. Uh, I'm traumatized by all those seasons of Smallville where everyone wore a leather jacket.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, um, you really can have you can do anything with a comic book movie. If you want to have your hero in a purple leotard, you can do that. And it's kind of a bit disappointing when, they kind of just harp on the stuff that came before, and it does kind of feel like they're just and it's reading a bit too much into a joke at the end of the day, but it does feel like they're not really too committed, and I feel a lot of the best superhero movies are committed to an idea. Yes, a man can fly. Yes, this guy is vengeance. Yes, um, this guy is Iron Man. Hmm?
This guy's half vampire,
This guy is half vampire.
and he
Um,
fucking hates vampires.
so I like it when movies commit to an idea, and this one kind of falls in that vein. But and we're now speaking in the CGI tinted glasses post superhero glut of movies where a lot of that seems to have been lost, where okay, here's this weird faceless thing from just different things that don't really present themselves as earnest in modern comic book movies.
You know what I think they should do? They should. They shouldn't stop doing comic book movies. They should stop doing superhero movies.
Hmm.
They should. You should get more stuff like Saga, Bitch Planet, Sex Criminals, like newer good stuff, but
Hmm.
also like old shit like Bone, Madman. Why not? And
And
Madman.
I feel like Netflix is kind of trying to go that direction where they're making comic book shows, comic book content. Like even like let's say Nemona's the Nemona movies based on a fairly new graphic novel by uh the DreamWorks She-Ra creator.
Mhm.
Um So they are getting a lot of comic book content, but um, I don't feel superhero movie. I'll argue that superhero movies haven't grown um stale. It's more like the vision of them has grown stale, where it's okay, it's either going to be an origin movie or a big old team up movie, and it just feels like that's it. And then like with me, I'm feeling a bit. I think we talked about this before, but that multiverse fatigue,
Yeah.
where it's not a bad concept. I think people are ready to embrace the multiverse. It's not like, oh, people are against multiverse as a concept, but you have to have a good story attached to it. Otherwise, it doesn't really do anything. You've got to have a good story, like let's say Spider Verse, everything everywhere all at once. Otherwise, it's just, oh, here's a guy with some ants and a big face guy from a Robert Rodriguez film.
Hmm. Um, yeah. I mean, but the glut of superhero movies is something that needs to be reined in. I'm just glad that people always say like, oh, we don't get, small movies or thoughtful movies. You do, but they're TV shows.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like all of the kind of I don't want to call it prestige TV. I fucking hate that term. But the kind of more grounded, more written stuff, it's all on TV. And like
Mm-hmm.
that's where a lot of people are going. Um, but and I mean it's weird to think that like the TV shows are more mature than the movies now, where it's like you'll probably see more nudity in a TV show than a movie. Like when the who thought that would happen?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think that the superhero glut will kind of dwindle. It's not like you're gonna get rid of them all. It'll be like how there was just a ton of spy movies in the 60s after Bond came out, and they were like, let's leave this alone for like a decade. Like, we can make spy movies, but don't like make big deals of them for like maybe decade and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's basically what's going to happen. You can't put the genie back in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once you've made a Bond movie, you made a Bond movie. Like people are gonna go see. People are gonna love it. Like there's kind of no going back. But I don't think it can take the momentum that it's been going in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think, less and more quality. I think less movies, more quality.
Yeah.
Um, like I do feel hopeful, like with James Gunn taking the mantle, because he's
Mm.
someone who's really story driven. He's not really someone who just, oh, here's a random fan service for no reason.
Yeah.
He's going to include someone, and he's going to include his own take. So I just think it requires someone with a vision. Whereas, like a lot of the Marvel stuff kind of just feels like now it's just on autopilot.
That's something that
And
does. Oh, sorry. I thought.
uh, yeah, and then even the behind the scenes things seem to indicate that they have fight scenes already choreographed well before they even have a director or a script attached to a film,
Mhm.
if that behind the scenes is to be believed.
Yeah, that's the thing I really appreciate about Gunn. He is character driven and story driven, even if his stuff is utterly bizarre or crass. That's kind of the
The
appeal to
trauma.
his trauma stuff. Um, there's kind of like a chewing gum and spit quality to it
Mhm.
that I think a lot of people lose when they start to make bigger movies. He kind of kept it. These still seem kind of like, even though they're not, they seem like kind of fly by the seat of your pants type productions. And that's one thing I do like about Gunn is that he um puts his own take on stuff. Like the Drax in the movie isn't the Drax in the comics, but I love the Drax in the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So, folks, I hope you love this talk about the Phantom.
The Phantom, everyone.
Phantom.
Well, we did mention Drax, so we get points there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
We mentioned Drax, and I guess to close it off, what were your thoughts on riffing this movie? Because that's it's not too big a secret that we wound up doing this for our movie manglers.
Yeah. I liked it because it was a full house. Like we even had the B team. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it was fun. We do movies sometimes that are genuinely fun. I like Devil's Carnival. I like Story of Ricky. They're just fun movies. And but it was neat to riff this. And I remember there was one joke where I resigned. Um, but yeah, the one of the things that made it really enjoyable was kind of the Viking funeral, the proverbial Viking funeral for Treat Williams,
Mm-hmm.
which he's wonderful in this, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
I I described it as like if Johnny Depp's Ed Wood was Lex Luthor. Because he has this quality to him. Oh, the allegations, that's just a bunch of flummery. There's always that kind of, my name is Xander Drax. I'm extraordinarily rich. I can give you money. Like just this wonderful 1930s, 40s quality to him
Uh-huh.
that I don't think a lot of people cotton on to.
No. For me, I just found it just so insane just how it picked up in in like the last 10 or 15 minutes. Where
Yeah.
just so much happens at the end. I wouldn't call it a slow-paced movie by any stretch because, I feel a lot of this is good exposition for people who don't know the Phantom. But
Yeah, it moves.
man, that those last those last 15 minutes are just such a mad dash to the end.
Which I think is how things should be, because yeah, it's like wrap this up. We're gotta get home.
I just remember being more what towards the end when you get all the artifacts and then you just vaporize people and then I'm like, okay. I would appreciate just a little bit of exposition just to tell me what just happened.
They're Jesse, they're magic.
Oh,
A
a wizard
wizard
did it.
a wizard did it. Yeah.
A wizard did it, everyone.
Anyways, R.I.P. Treat Williams. Salud. Uh I think that's it for this episode. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Not at the moment, no. This was a fun conversation about the one and only the Phantom
Yep. So
and nothing else.
and yeah, and nothing else. No tangents or nothing. Um
No.
yeah. So anyways, goodbye everyone.